weird to see me from a minute ago. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. We really appreciate you coming to our live stream tonight. We have an amazing artist talk with Mark Oldland for his current Puddle Jumping exhibition, which is up through the end of this month, so be sure to see it if you haven't yet. And we also have a whole web page on frontlinearts.org with a gallery walkthrough and all the images if you're not able to make it in person. So I'm Rachel, the executive director. This is actually my final transmission in my final hours here, so it's a little bittersweet, but I wouldn't want to spend it any other way. I'm really proud to introduce Mark Oldland. He's been coming here since about 2017, 2018, and Mark is a Coast Guardsman who also has fine art degrees from both PAFA, the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art, and MICA, Maryland Institute and College of Art, and he's a really incredible artist. And it's been super amazing working with him. He jumped in to really help us out a lot with the Scrubs project since 2020, made large-scale paper from his uniform in our parking lot, and then became our very first veteran artist in residence with the 52 Reasons to Love a Vet Fund in 2022. So this exhibition, after he also got to go to Monson in Maine, is the culmination of that work. And it's a really incredible show. So I will stop talking and I'll let you lead the floor, Mark. Congratulations again. It's an incredible show.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I want to kind of start off, first off, making certain I get all my thank yous in, because this show would not have happened had it not been for some key integral people. The first and foremost being my wife Leanne and my son Kyle, and every bit of that you see on the wall, they are within each work just as much as I am. So it's important that I acknowledge them. And then of course Rachel, who you just all saw very recently, as she mentioned, today is her last day, so we want to make certain that we give her a good welcome send off. We really appreciate everything that she's done for everyone here, all the veteran artists here at Frontline Arts and all the other artists that come here. And of course the other two people who were integral in helping me hang the show were Lindsay Knight. She's also the camera person behind everything that's going on here tonight. And Kath, I'm sorry, Kath, your last name is pronounced. I won't attempt to do it because she's waving me off with the pronunciation. So, and then of course all the other frontline artists, in particular Walt and Ron, who really shepherded me through learning how to make all the wonderful paper that you see on the walls throughout the show. So again, thank you to all those people. It's really important that I acknowledge them. So when I had a chance to get this opportunity, specifically about talking in this forum to everyone, I had a ton of ideas. I was like, I really wanted, because I had as you see the show, I have a very clear message that I'm trying to send and speak towards. So I had a ton of ideas about how I was going to really make this impactful message and make this talk really impactful. So there was a ton of ideas. I was going to do a specific piece for it that was going to be specific to this specific talk. I was going to do all sorts of thoughts. I was going to have I had some thoughts about talking about things in kind of poetry. I even had a dance performance piece that I had been working out in my brain, and it's still working out in my brain, and maybe someday that would actually happen. I can actually dance pretty well, for those that have seen. So all of that was in my brain, and all of those things were happening, and I was like, this is what I wanted to do, and all of it is not what you're going to get. Because let's face it, I'm autistic, and the reality is 90% of all the trying that goes on in my brain doesn't come out to being doing. That's just the fact of being neurodivergent. You know, all the stuff that you see on the wall is probably about 1/10 of that, of trying. All the trying and trying and trying and trying. And I bring all that up because, you know, well, that's specific to my autistic experience, and I would never venture to say I speak towards everybody's autistic experience. What it is, I think, important to take away from that is I think it's pretty common amongst almost everybody you talk to that's neurodivergent in saying this: don't ever mistake my lack of doing for a lack of trying. And no matter what your reason is for coming here, whether it's, you know, to see all the artwork, if it's you're coming here because you are a caretaker of someone that's neurodivergent, you're coming here because you're neurodivergent yourself, or it's a mix of those things. That's, if you're taking nothing away else from this, what I have to say here tonight, take that away. Don't ever mistake the lack of doing for the lack of trying. And that goes to, if specifically I'm talking to the caretakers out there when I'm saying that, but I'm also talking to those of you that are neurodivergent, because you need to say that to yourselves, because I know what it's like to sit there and say, I'm not accomplishing things, I'm not doing all these things that are going on in my brain that need to get done, that I really, really want to say out to the world, but I'm not actually doing it. Well, no, you are trying. You are trying more than anybody else there probably realizes. And so when I go into this, I want you guys to be thinking about that, not just as I talk about the work, but as after this talk, long after. So in saying that, I wanted to kind of start off a little bit differently. You know, usually you'll go through the very beginning of the show and you'll start talking it through how it's sequenced out here. But that's not how I laid this show out. There's a lot of different ways that I would like the viewer to see this work. So when I talk about things, I'm going to jump around a little bit. And in doing so, also, I'll probably use some definitions and terms that you may or may not know. I'm not going to take the time to go through all of those things. If you have a question on those terms, if it's not self-explanatory while I'm talking about it, by all means, please send it in the chat. Lindsay will either answer to it directly, or she'll make certain that I address it at some point during the Q&A portion of the talk. So I just want to make certain that you're aware of that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is this. Everything I said up to this point is for everyone. Whether you're neurodivergent, whether you are not neurodivergent, whether you're a caretaker, or wherever you're coming into, everything I've said up to this point is for you guys. Now, the rest of this talk, it's not for you. This is for the neurodivergent people out there. If you're autistic and you're neurodivergent, the rest of the talk's for you guys. I'm speaking to you guys because here's a secret. Being autistic, it's cool as bleep. And I say bleep because I don't like to swear, but the reality is it's cool as bleep, and not everybody else knows that. So we're going to showcase that today. We're going to talk about how cool it is to be autistic. All right? So to do so, I'm going to start over here at a piece that isn't part of the puddle jumping portion of the series. It was a piece that I did or was thinking about long before I got into thinking about all this concept of puddle jumping, and a term that I like to call autistic joy, right? And we'll get into that a little bit later. But to do so, to get to that point, I had to come to this point, which is I had to set aside all of the stuff before I became very openly autistic to everybody. I had to set aside all the stuff that happened to me in childhood, all the stuff that I did to other people. And I had to set all of that aside, and I had to move forward and recognize, in order for me to be my best self, I had to accept the fact that being autistic is great in its own way. And it's just different. And so to do that, this piece is called Water Under the Bridge. And it's really talking towards just letting all that stuff go. And then moving forward with a recognition and being proud of who I am and all the things that makes me different, about how I think differently. All that had to be done. I had to be able to go out to people and say, yeah, I'm autistic, and that's okay, and actually it's really, really great. So that piece was what I was thinking about when I created it, and it was really important because to do it here, because this was really, Frontline Arts was the first place that I ever came to where I stepped in the door and I didn't hide or mask my stims or anything like that. I came out and I just said, listen, I'm autistic, and that's who I am. So that's why this piece is in this show. So moving along, as I mentioned, the rest of the show, the most, as it was previously mentioned by Rachel, and then as many other, I'm going to walk over here to the other side of the gallery and talk about some other work. Most of the other pieces in the show are centered around the theme of puddle jumping and the activity of jumping in puddles, which I think, whether you're neurodivergent or not, puddle jumping is a pretty cool, fun thing to do. Everybody can relate to it at some point in their life. Most people had some sense or some memory of what that experience is like, and they recognize it as being thrilling, fun, and exciting. All right? So most of the images you see throughout the show are centered around that theme, but there are some that aren't. Some that are more, a little bit different from that, but they still center around that same thrilling concept of autistic joy. Things that make, specifically to somebody that might be autistic or neurodivergent, really, really special for them, and every bit as exciting as jumping in puddles. Or, even to some extent, every bit as exciting as going to Disney World. And that's important, because I want you, as you think about this, as you hear me talk about all these different experiences, jumping in puddles and stuff like that, I also want the viewer to also think about these other things that are just as exciting, that maybe you don't quite understand or relate to, as being just as exciting and different and maybe mundane or strange, quote unquote, or weird, as being just as thrilling and exciting as things that you might associate with as going to a theme park or jumping in puddles. So that brings me to this piece here, and what you see here on the wall are, it's laid out in a triptych, deliberately so, and you'll see it's basically the same images printed in large scale over and over. Most of them were done on this cream-colored paper, which is just a cream-colored arches paper, and it was done in an edition of 17 on this cream-colored paper. But then there are 3 others, oh, and actually 4 others, that I made on this paper, which is handmade paper that Ron and Walt from Frontline Arts helped me pull from my Coast Guard dress trout uniform shirt. And each one of the 4 has a different color. Each of that color associates itself with a favorite color of the people that are in my immediate family. So for example, this is the favorite color of my son, Kai. And these others I call so I call these, the 4 that are on the handmade Coast Guard paper, the family puddles. And then these are the community puddles. All right, and there's 17 of these. And when I originally first displayed them, they were when I was doing the second half of this residency in Monson, Maine. And I had the opportunity to kind of preview them to the public there. And many of the people that came in there, part of the interactive experience, because a lot of my work's interactive, is that I invited the public of those 17 to name the pieces themselves after somebody that they felt close to. Didn't have to be any other thing other than that. And just people within the community that they had for whatever reason. So there's 2 here that I had chosen to display here in the gallery, buttressing it alongside and sort of protecting the one that represents my son. So it's sort of, when I'm putting it in and displaying here, it's in what I'm talking about here, what I'm trying to convey, at least in this particular display, is that I'm hoping that through all of this work, the community helps be that support system, support structure that I know individuals like myself, individuals like my son, other neurodivergent individuals will need in order to proceed forward and be their best self. And so when you see this displayed like that, that's sort of what I'm thinking about, and that was the intention behind it. And then further, I went through and I printed off several hundred cardstock images of the same image. They're just from an art printer on several cardstock images. I printed them, and the intention in these particular ones are free, and they're intended for anybody that comes here and views this work to kind of hopefully take that away, that concept of the community working with the neurodivergent community and and they take that away and take one of these away as a kind of a reminder that my hope is that they become part of that community. So for those that are here in the gallery, please, before you leave, grab one, thumb through them, pick one. There's a myriad of colors, because everybody's got a different favorite color for you to pick and take home, and you do with it what you want. So then moving on. As I mentioned earlier on, that there are things that are really directly connected to the puddle jumping experience, and if I could just back up a little bit. So when you go through this, there's often a mistake of, oh, this is what somebody's often said, like, is this what you see? And no, this is not what I see. This is just what you have to understand. For me, when I experience something that's as enthralling as this, is it leaves a lasting impression. And that lasting impression is not just the visual, it's the sensory, both in the smell, all the sensories that's left an impression on me. And so these images are sort of, I would say, a representational depiction of that impression. So you could say it's abstract, but for me it's almost as real as viewing a really well-defined, realistic drawing or painting of a puddle. So I kind of want you to kind of get that sense also as you're going through this, that it's just that's important for you to understand about. There's no way for you to understand fully what it's like to be autistic, but at least you can get a sense of what's important to me. Okay? So then when you come over here, you'll see another puddle jumping. I've done several prints of different impressions of these puddles and jumping in puddles and stuff like that. And this is one of those. It's so this one's titled Puddle Jumping number 8. But there's 3 different ways I pulled this print. I pulled it on a red, I pulled it predominantly on a yellow, and I pulled it on a green. And so it's Puddle Jumping number 8, red or stop. Puddle Jumping number 8, yellow or slow down. And then the last one is green, or go have fun. All right? And one of the things that is intentionally put into here, into this show, as I mentioned, are little things that speak towards things that may not be as interesting or exciting to you, but they sure can be exciting to somebody that's neurodivergent. And I can tell you for certainty that this particular thing that I'm speaking towards is a traffic light, and I can tell you right now, there's one person very special to me who every time he sees a traffic light has something to say about it, has some comments about it, and definitely really thinks they're pretty cool. I mean, why wouldn't you? Because listen, they light up, they make big bright lights, they change off and on, and they tell you when you can go and when you can't go. What's not exciting and interesting about that? So that's another one. That's one of those moments. So when you're thinking about what's exciting and interesting in life, maybe sometimes think about these other little things that might be different and mundane to you, but if you see somebody else that's really engaged, really excited, really wants to talk about them, maybe give them a half a chance. Because if you, let's say, love talking about sports, and all you talk about is sports, and sports this and whatever, at some point, you know, some people may tune you out. That tends to happen a lot more quickly when you're talking about something that's not as interesting as sports in the mainstream sense, but if you're talking about it in something less interesting to most of the public out there, people are going to tune you out, and that's going to make somebody feel less themselves. So when I'm talking to you, the neurodivergent crowd out there, I want you to recognize it's okay. It's okay to talk about and be excited about these things, because this is what autistic joy is all about. It's being excited and being just as, free to have the fun that everybody else has, even if it's completely different. So, I'm going to jump and skip over these. Not that these are great images, but they're self-explanatory. If you get a chance to come here and see the show, by all means, this is called another series of street puddles. This is just another cool puddle image that I had kind of played around with in my head. And then we come to here, which is another piece. It's not the same as the Puddle Jumping series per se, because it's not an image that comes to mind that I kind of brought to the forefront in thinking with Puddle Jumping. And it's actually part of another series that I'm working towards, where it's called The Whole World Stims. And this is where I really, in that series, I'm talking and thinking a little bit about the phenomenon of stimming and who's stimming and why they're stimming, but I won't necessarily get too far down into that, other than to say that despite all that, this particular image, even though it's in a different series, is reflective of autistic joy. And the reason I say that is because this was image, if you come to see it, is derived from a very happy place. It comes from the observation I've made of somebody that's very special to me about their stimming and how and when they do it, they get really excited. And so the title of the piece is The Whole World Stims, Flappiness is Happiness. And anybody that knows me and my immediate family, and has spent any time with me and my immediate family, if they come and they see this image, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And they know who I'm exactly talking about. And I just thought I'd point it out here because it's a piece that's near and dear to me, and I think it's another representation of this autistic joy concept that I think is really important, because I think what's often not accounted for enough is just giving those that are neurodivergent the space to have happiness and be joyful and do the things they love to do. You'll hear me repeat that a lot. So then we come to this other piece here, which is called There Are No Perfect Puddles. And this is sort of an installation piece or an interactive piece. And it really is, it's gone through several iterations. And this is sort of where it's landed at least for the time being. And the way this piece came together is it's a series of printed images on cardstock. And these printed images, if you'll note, if almost the predominant way I'm creating work here, not everything, but most everything is through screen printing. And so these cardstock printed images are all of screened or layered images that somewhere else in the show, you'll find it. So if you thumb through the cardstock, you'll find these images somewhere else in the show. But the intention is that you take these cardstock images, and then I also did the same thing. But these are, instead of printing out on our printer, these are actually physically hand printed or screen printed onto transparencies or frosted transparencies. And the idea behind here is to invite the viewer to come and create and make their own puddles themselves. And piece them together and come up with the image that makes them happy and joyful. And you'll see here on the wall, I made some examples or ones that I pieced together for the viewer to model themselves. But it really is, it's a mix and match adventure. And there's several ways you can look at it. It's just like, listen, we're all coming together to create this great big community and space. And the more input and interaction and inclusion that we put towards everybody that allows people to engage, the better and stronger the work will be. And that's kind of what I'm thinking behind here. And in addition to that, everything, it's intended to be either interactive or accessible, whether that's, accessible to touch or accessible to take home or in some capacity, because that's another underlying theme that I'm putting through in this work is that it's important that everything's accessible for everybody. Again, if you get a chance, come in here, come and play with the work, and maybe you'll find some images that you can relate to, that you'll find, and then can bring back some excitement for yourself. So then, I had already pointed out this piece, the importance of this piece, and then you'll find several other screen images. This is a really nice image that I put together. It's one of my favorites because it's visually just speaks to me. It's just a puddle jumping image. It's Puddle Jumping number 6. This piece here, on this wall over here it's a series of printed images done. It's a variable edition screen prints, and it's called Dare to Be Different. In general, it's a self-explanatory piece. If you come up here, you'll kind of get what I'm pointing towards here. It's important to be bold, be different, and the more we're doing that for ourselves, I think the happier we're all going to be. So then the last piece, or last two pieces that I kind of want to touch upon, is one of the pieces that's most visually different than everything else that's in here is one of the few pieces that has what you would be traditionally considered to be representational imagery. And it's called the conclusion piece, or the conclusion puddle. And it's really just thinking about myself and my son, who's my puddle jumping compadre, we're kind of just sort of walking off in the sunset after a fun day of jumping in puddles. But I think the other thing that's really cool about this piece, not only is it's made with paper that's from my Coast Guard uniform, so it puts a piece of myself and it allows him to be a part of it, is that if you look here, it's another area where I brought in some of the imagery from elsewhere. So I actually physically screen. So it's a mixed media piece. Most of it's graphite, charcoal, some ink, but then there's also a screened image that was from one of the other puddle jumping screen prints that kind of really naturally just sort of fits and flows into the work, and it kind of gives that background of rain falling off into the distance. And then lastly, the other piece that seemingly doesn't fit at all, but it's another one of those moments where I'm talking about other parts of the world which bring autistic joy that you may not think about. So this is just as it looks. It's a screened, hand-pulled screen print edition of the Stanley automatic door caution sign that we all see every day. And the reason I put this in here is because just like all the puddle jumping, my son is hugely thrilled and fascinated by doors, automatic doors, elevators, everything like that. So it's just as interesting and just as exciting as all the puddle jumping. And so I bring this here to you because I want you to kind of get that sense of these other moments of autistic joy that happen and be cognizant of them, because if you're not defining yourself as neurodivergent, don't just discount somebody else's joy just because you don't understand it. And so that's sort of what I'm talking about here. So with that said, I kind of have taken you really briefly through all of this work and what I've been thinking about when I'm doing it. So I kind of wanted, at this point, to maybe open it up. Did anybody want to see any more of the pieces more closely? Did they have any questions about the work? Any questions about what I was thinking? Anything like that? Lindsay?
There's nothing yet, but I wrote in the comments, but I just wanted to say that each piece is photographed and listed on our website with alt text descriptions as well that Hugo wrote. So if anyone wants to see stuff more closely, like really closely, you can also go on our website on Mark's exhibition page.
Thank you. Anybody, any questions from the people that are here? No?
I'll jump
One?
in if I'm allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that, well, you did a wonderful presentation also at our benefit in
Yeah.
2022, and you put together a really cool video of Kyle, your son, for that presentation, and that's what really kind of helped me understand the puddle jumping as well. So, I mean, like, obviously there's autistic joy in the act of doing it, and I think this is just so wonderful that that's, you know, the show's really about your connection with him. But my sense too was there's kind of like a ritual about it, right? Is there like a routine, or after it rains a certain
Yeah,
amount
I mean, it is. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're living in my house, yeah, it's definitely, it's nothing that isn't ritualistic. Yeah, I mean, it's really, we have very specific puddles, I mean, that we jump in. I can almost, through the images, place you in each particular place when I'm looking at them. In some cases, my wife might be able to do so as well. So yeah, so there's very specific puddles we jump in. There's very specific, you know, when I say we jump in puddles, I mean we jump in puddles. We get into the dead of winter, and it's first ice melt and snow melt. We're putting on all the gear and going out and jumping in puddles. So, and it's not like for the faint of heart. It's, you're going in and you're getting wet. So, does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, I just, I wanted to help get across that, you know, that it's really like an activity. It's
this is a serious thing. Like we could probably make it into an actual sport or something that could be an Olympic event. I mean, it's that serious when we do it. So it's not like this is like, oh, we're just going out and jumping in puddles. We're seriously doing it. And when I say these other things, whether it's a traffic light, whether it's a door or an elevator, when I say we're doing it, we're doing it. Like we're spending hours videotaping all these activities and really immersing ourselves in these activities, because that's what my family does to have this get where we just, as a whole, we have this, the autistic joy together.
We have a comment.
Yeah.
The Gwenons, they wrote, great talk, Harrison loved it, we hope to see it in person soon.
That's,
Yay.
I've got like a nitty-gritty question.
yeah.
So you speak about like the autistic joy with you and your family and the ritualistic, aspect of puddle jumping. But how is it like behind the closed scenes too? Like when you're drawing the work and you're printing the work, like is there joy for that with you?
Oh yeah. So I'm listening to music. These are as I'm producing the work. Save for the very mundane portions of making prints that none of us really get. Save for those really, when I say that, I mean like the parts that really stink about
People that like
cleaning up
Washing
all
the
this.
stick coat.
Yeah, exactly. All those parts of it that are not necessarily the most thrilling part of screen printing or any part of printing. But save for that, I mean, there's just from the moment that I'm producing the work, and most of the imagery is to kind of get to the technical. I'll do a lot of the works on at least the screen printed images are drawn out on my iPad, and then fortunately through the residency, I've learned to be able to do that and reproduce those images in screen printed images, because fortunately I've kind of trained myself to be able to draw in a way on the iPad that benefits that, in the sense that I for those for the techie people in terms of putting together work, I draw in layers so that I ensure that each layer is more easily translated over into making prints of any kind. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting to draw the parallel of like the repetition here and then like knowing the ritual of like, that first snow melt or every time it rains. So it's almost like you're revisiting that same puddle but like over and over and over again.
Yeah, pretty much, and then we do that almost whether I'm doing it here, I'm doing it.
Like you see it in this series, you see it in this series, you see it here, you see it here, you see it here.
Yeah.
So it is like this ode to like, so just curious in like the back end of it. Like you find that same joy when it's just you in the basement screen printing.
Yeah, there's just that same sense of like, and then that moment of like when it all kind of comes together the way you want it to is just, it's the same as that first moment of kind of just jumping in. So, Lindsay?
So as someone who works full time and is a dad, how do you carve out time to make art a priority?
Well, mainly it's my family that's supporting us is the one, and then the other is that I don't know. I think it's part of that. It goes back to that first statement I said. Don't mistake my lack of doing for lack of, but it's sort of the reverse. Like all of that carving out of time is like have to go through like hours and hours and hours and hours of it recreating in my brain, so that when it comes down to actually physically producing the work, when I'm able to get myself to actually do, it's really quick, because anybody that's really worked alongside me, I think they can attest, I work really, really fast. Like, I work really fast, and sometimes I even surprise myself how fast I work. And I think that's it. It's not really carving out the time so much as I'm maximizing the time I have, because I've learned over the course of my life how to get to that point of taking all that pent up energy of really struggling to, all that trying energy, really struggling to do, and I've learned how to channel that so that I'm kind of working through it enough so that when I hit the ground running. I apply that pretty much anywhere, both whether it's working artwork here or I'm working just in my own other professional life. I do probably about, for the amount of work, the physical doing that actually occurs, I'm doing about hours and hours and hours of just doing it in my brain that I can't shut off, to kind of just so that I'm successful at it. Does that help?
Yeah, and we've been, oh, I'm sorry, you go ahead first, and then I'll read the online question. Go ahead.
That begins answering the question I was gonna ask of, like, how do these forms come to you? Like, I found it really fascinating what you said about this, how this represents a puddle just as much as any, more classical, non-abstract style. Is it, do you have it kind of premeditated, or does it come to you? Is it a feeling? Do you fuss with it? Do you look at the shape, or like, how does that?
It's very
come out?
experiential. So it's, I guess, the closest through the process. I mean, I guess you could say it's similar to the abstract expressionist, but it's not. It's different because I think what I'm feeling, at least, like I said, I feel it more, almost in a visceral sense, it being real than it is so much as it's an abstract. Like I struggle with the term abstract when I view these images because they aren't so abstracted to me. But in terms of, there's an immediacy, it's clear there's immediacy to when it's actually applied to the canvas or the paper or whatever that I'm using to create. There's an immediacy to it, but it's all the background stuff that's going on that allows for that immediacy to happen. And anybody that's followed my work from its inception, and there might be somebody that maybe, if you were fortunate enough to see me back when I was at MICA, that's Maryland Institute College of Art, I was doing very similar work around water. In those cases, it wasn't puddle jumping. It was another activity I just thoroughly enjoy, and at that time I was able to do it because I was younger. But I did it pretty extensively, which was whitewater kayaking. So I did a lot of similar work around water at that time, and the images I produced at that time were very similar in that way. But it also kind of, when you know that, you also know about, then you say, well, how did you get, for those that know the extensive history of me, how did you go from art school from art school I went into the Coast Guard, from the Coast Guard to working elsewhere in the federal government, to now working in, continuing your art career, but working in what they all relate to. The one common theme is the water. So there is this connection to water that I've always had, that kind of sort of always, there's impressions of that throughout my time that sort of always just are there.
So we have another question from the Pequanans.
Okay.
Was puddle jumping something that you found joyful from a young age, or is that something that you became fond of as you got older?
The prior answer is similar to that. Yeah, so there's water excel. So you could say yes if you take into the fact that I was going over 30-foot waterfalls in a whitewater kayak, so that's in essence puddle jumping. so that's the extreme puddle jumping. Yeah, define puddle. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, I also feel like to printmaking.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you wanted to talk about that at all.
Well, I mean, to see the painting influences most directly, you just
Right.
don't need to go any further than this
Yeah.
piece, because, so to talk about the technical aspect of this piece, as opposed to everything else I described in drawing things out in my iPad and, working out layering from an image that's sort of computer-based or digital-based work, this was done with what's called drawing fluid. So what that basically boils down to is the image that you see here that was reproduced through screen printing was not taken from a photograph or taken from anything that I did on an iPad in a digital format. I physically drew or painted this image onto the screen that I used to do screen printing, and then through that, and then again, that's that immediacy, that level of understanding of what I wanted to do, so much so that when I went into it, I could just do it with full confidence and being fully, the immediacy that needed to happen was through all that trying that was going on in my head. But then, of course, also the painter influence. Like I kind of had that background where I can manipulate the brush with enough confidence that I can attack an image like that.
But you're multiplying it now.
Yes,
Yes.
so now I'm multiplying. And I'm, through all my other things that I'm working on, things that haven't come to fruition here, I'm really, those that have followed elsewhere and some of the other things, I am really doing a lot of taking the printing knowledge and then crossing it over into painting and then back and forth. So it's actually just enhanced my ability to communicate these thoughts and these images to the public.
You talked about accessibility earlier on, and I know because I've watched you change your artwork over the years, and changing the idea of what art is. And can you talk about how your view and how you've worked has transitioned along that accessibility line?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I think, so yeah, then just that simple thought of just what makes, like the images are, what makes art to me now when I'm thinking about it isn't necessarily the finished product, it's that act. I've gotten to the point of like, the action is the most important thing. Not that this isn't important. It's important because I wouldn't put it up on the wall if it wasn't important. But to have that action. So it starts with the actions. Making, as I said, making these actions more accessible in the sense of making it acceptable for these actions to occur, whether it's jumping in puddles or spending time just watching a traffic light or hanging out with doors, making it accessible for the public to be able to understand or allow those moments of autistic joy to happen is one thing I really hope that people take away from this. And then there's also the other aspects that as I went through in doing this, I've transformed. It's about just trying to make certain like that the artwork itself is really open and available in as many ways and in as many formats as possible. And so that's why when you look throughout here, I'm trying to find as many ways for anybody, no matter what you're coming into, wherever you're coming to this space from, if you want to take something home with you, there's an opportunity for you to do so. So, hopefully that answers that question. Any other questions?
Nope, and we're right at like 6:53, so.
Okay, perfect. Well, I hope you get a chance to come see the show. With that, I don't know if Rachel, you want to come up here and say your final goodbye to the audience?
No, another one. Well, thank you, Mark. That was an incredible, informative talk. I always didn't know if you had anything either. We'll all say goodbye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.